Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Confession. Dominic Mercer stared at the ceiling of his home office, the same ceiling he'd painted himself 3 summers ago when they'd first bought the house in Oak Ridge Heights. The pristine white now seemed to mock him with its perfection. His daughter's words still rang in his ears, each syllable like a hammer blow to his chest. "Daddy, I need to tell you something, but I'm scared," 11-year-old Lily had whispered earlier that afternoon, her small hands twisting nervously in her lap. Tears had welled in her hazel eyes identical to his. "Mom said if I tell you about Uncle Rick staying overnight, she'll send me to boarding school far away." He'd felt his world tilt on its axis in that moment. Uncle Rick, Richard Denton, his wife's brother-in-law, married to her sister Vanessa. The man who'd slapped his back at barbecues, who'd laughed at his jokes, who'd helped him install the basketball hoop in the driveway for Lily's 10th birthday. Dominic had kept his face neutral, despite the acid churning in his stomach. "You can tell me anything, sweetheart. I promise nothing bad will happen to you." Lily had broken down then, her small shoulders shaking. "When you went to Chicago last month for work, Uncle Rick stayed over. They were in your bedroom, Daddy. They told me and Tommy they were watching movies, but I heard noises and got scared. When I went to check, they were in your bed." Dominic had held his daughter as she cried, his mind a whirlwind of rage and disbelief. Tommy, his 7-year-old son, had been in the next room, blissfully playing video games, unaware that his world was about to implode. Now, as night fell, Dominic's thoughts turned cold and methodical. He would not confront his wife yet. Miranda Mercer, with her perfect smile and community volunteer badges, had been his wife for 13 years. The woman he'd postponed his dreams for. The woman who'd apparently betrayed him in their own bed. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in years. "Bryce? It's Dom. I need surveillance equipment. The best you've got. And I need it by tomorrow." Bryce Wellington had been his roommate in college, now running a private security firm. His voice was concerned but professional. "Dom, what's going on? I'll explain when I see you. Just know I've never been more serious about anything." After hanging up, Dominic pulled out a leather-bound journal from his desk drawer. Inside were notes about his business ventures, his investments. A self-made man who'd built a successful chain of fitness centers across the state. Dominic had learned early in life to plan meticulously. His father, a factory worker who'd lost everything to a gambling addiction, had taught him what not to do. Now, he flipped to a blank page and began to write. This would be his most important plan yet. Miranda wouldn't be back until late. She'd texted about a PDA emergency meeting. Dominic knew now what that really meant. His hands shook with rage, but he steadied them. Emotion couldn't drive this. Strategy would. He thought about his children upstairs, sleeping peacefully. They deserved better than this chaos. He thought about his business, his reputation in the community. Everything he'd worked for was at stake. But most of all, he thought about the look in Lily's eyes when she shared her secret. The fear, the confusion. His daughter had been threatened with boarding school to keep her silent. That, more than anything, solidified his resolve. By the time Miranda's car pulled into the driveway at 11:43 p.m., Dominic had composed himself. He pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, smelling of unfamiliar cologne. Beside her, he remained rigid, his mind calculating his next moves. Tomorrow would be the first day of Miranda's reckoning. Chapter 2, The Evidence. 3 miniature cameras, each no bigger than a shirt button. 2 audio devices with crystal clear reception. 1 GPS tracker. All installed strategically throughout the house, while Miranda took the kids to her sister's house. Vanessa's house. Ironically enough, Dominic had called in sick to work, something he'd done perhaps twice in the last decade. He didn't trust himself to maintain the facade of normalcy while surrounded by employees who respected him. Not yet. Bryce had delivered the equipment personally that morning, his usually jovial face serious, as he helped Dominic set everything up. "These are military grade, Dom. You'll see and hear everything." Dominic nodded, focused on the tiny monitor that now displayed their bedroom from 3 different angles. Is this legal? Bryce hesitated. It's your house, man. But what you do with this evidence, that's where things get complicated. I just need to know the truth, Dominic said, though they both knew it was more than that. After Bryce left, Dominic spent hours poring through financial records, insurance policies, property deeds. 13 years of marriage had entangled their lives in countless ways. The fitness centers were his, started before they'd met, but their home, their vacation property on Lake Geneva, their investments, all jointly owned. His phone buzzed with a text from Miranda, be home by 6. Bringing takeout from Salvatore's. Your favorite. His stomach turned. Her attempts at normalcy felt like another betrayal. While waiting, he called his old friend Neil Boyd, now a successful divorce attorney. Their conversation was brief but informative. According to Neil, infidelity could impact custody arrangements and asset division depending on how it was presented to the court. Evidence is everything, Dom, Neil had emphasized, and timing is crucial. Dominic spent the afternoon in his home gym, pushing his body to its limits, trying to exhaust the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. By the time the front door opened and the sound of his children's laughter filled the house, he had showered and composed himself. Miranda looked radiant as always, her dark hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. She moved with the grace that had first attracted him to her at a charity gala 15 years ago. Daddy, Tommy crashed into his legs, talking a mile a minute about the model airplane his Aunt Vanessa had bought him. Lily approached more cautiously, her eyes searching his for reassurance. Dominic hugged her tightly, whispering, "Everything's okay, Lil. I promised, remember?" Dinner was a surreal experience. Miranda chatted about neighborhood gossip, about Tommy's upcoming soccer tournament, about the charity auction she was helping organize. Dominic nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, all while noticing things he'd somehow missed before. The way she checked her phone under the table, the new bracelet on her wrist he didn't recognize, the slight stiffness in her smile when their eyes met. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Miranda approached him in his office. She leaned against the doorframe, wearing the silk robe he'd bought her for their anniversary. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, studying him. "Is everything okay at work?" Dominic looked at his wife, this stranger he'd shared his life with, and felt a cold detachment replace his earlier rage. "Just tired. Big project coming up." She nodded, seemingly relieved by his simple explanation. "Don't work too late. We have that dinner with the Harmons tomorrow night." The Harmons. Frank and Patty. Friends they'd vacationed with last summer. Had they known? Was he the laughingstock of their social circle? "I'll be up soon," he lied. After she left, Dominic turned to his computer and began researching private investigators. The cameras would give him evidence, but he needed to know the full extent of the betrayal. How long had it been going on? Were there others? As the night deepened, Dominic's resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice, for himself and for his children. Miranda and Richard had chosen this path. Now they would face the consequences. His phone pinged with an alert from one of the cameras. Miranda was making a call in their bathroom, voice hushed, water running to mask her words. But the technology Bryce had provided was too sophisticated for such simple countermeasures. "I miss you," she whispered into the phone. "Dom suspects nothing." "Yes, next week when he's in Denver. I'll tell him it's a spa weekend with the girls." Dominic watched, oddly calm, as the first piece of concrete evidence revealed itself. He recorded everything, saving multiple copies to secure cloud storage. By morning, he had the beginnings of a plan that would change all their lives forever. Chapter 3. The plan takes shape. 2 weeks passed in a fog of deception. Dominic played the role of oblivious husband while meticulously gathering evidence. The cameras captured 3 more visits from Richard, always during the day when the kids were at school. The GPS tracker documented Miranda's trips to a motel off the interstate, to Richard's office downtown, to a secluded lakeside cabin registered to a shell company that Dominic's private investigator, Floyd Russo, traced back to Richard. "They've been careful," Floyd explained during their discreet meeting at a coffee shop 3 towns over. The burly ex-detective slid a manila envelope across the table. But not careful enough. Based on credit card records and witness statements, this affair has been going on for approximately 11 months. 11 months. Nearly a year of lies. Dominic's hand tightened around his coffee cup. There's more, Floyd continued. Richard Denton has a pattern. Before your wife, there were 2 other married women. Both relationships ended badly. And his wife, Vanessa, seems unaware, or in denial. Floyd hesitated. There's another complication. Your wife has been making inquiries about liquid assets. Spoke with a financial advisor last week about what would happen to certain investments in the event of a divorce. So Miranda was planning her exit strategy. The realization should have hurt, but instead, it crystallized Dominic's resolve. That evening, he invited Bryce and Neil to his office downtown after hours. The 3 men sat surrounded by blueprints of Dominic's newest fitness center, but they weren't discussing business expansion. I want to be absolutely clear about what will happen, Neil said, reviewing the evidence Dominic had compiled. This is more than enough for divorce proceedings. With this, plus the financial documentation of your businesses predating the marriage, you'll likely retain primary custody and the majority of your assets. That's not enough, Dominic said quietly. They threatened my daughter, used my children as pawns. Bryce leaned forward. What exactly are you planning, Dom? Dominic unfolded a paper where he'd outlined his strategy. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. That would be too simple, too expected. No, what Dominic had in mind was more elaborate, more devastating. A complete dismantling of the lives Miranda and Richard had taken for granted. Jesus, Dom, Neil whispered as he read the plan. This is necessary, Dominic finished. And I'll need both of your help. The plan had multiple phases. First, securing his financial assets through a series of legal maneuvers Neil would help orchestrate. Second, gathering intelligence on Richard's business dealings through Bryce's connections. Third, the preparation for what Dominic called the revelation, a carefully orchestrated event that would expose the affair in the most public and damaging way possible. But there was a 4th phase that Dominic kept to himself, detailed in encrypted files on his personal laptop. This phase involved a woman named Alexis Novak, whom he'd met recently through a business connection. Alexis was brilliant, ambitious, and intriguingly direct about her interest in him. Under normal circumstances, Dominic would have politely maintained professional boundaries. But these weren't normal circumstances. There's one more thing, Dominic told his friends as their meeting concluded. I need to ensure the children are protected, emotionally and legally. They can't be collateral damage. Neil nodded. I've already drafted custody papers that emphasize Miranda's threats to send Lily to boarding school as punishment for telling the truth. Combined with the affair evidence, it makes a compelling case for you having primary custody. As Dominic drove home that night, past manicured lawns and gleaming houses filled with families who appeared perfect from the outside, he felt strangely calm. The initial shock and rage had condensed into something colder, more focused. Miranda had chosen deceit. He would choose precision. His phone rang. Miranda, wondering where he was. He answered with practiced normalcy, telling her he was working late, asking about the kids. Tommy lost another tooth, she said, and Lily got an A on her science project. Tell them I'm proud, Dominic replied, and he was. His children were the one pure thing in this mess. At home, Miranda greeted him with a kiss that felt like ash on his lips. As they moved through their evening routine, Dominic noted how perfectly she played her role, concerned wife, devoted mother. He'd once admired her social grace. Now he recognized it as the skill of a consummate actress. Later, checking the surveillance footage from his phone in the privacy of the garage, he watched as Miranda sent a text after believing he was asleep. He suspects nothing. Denver trip still on for next week. For days of freedom, Dominic smiled grimly in the darkness. For days that would change everything, but not in the way Miranda anticipated. Because while she thought he'd be in Denver closing a real estate deal for his newest fitness center, he would actually be executing the most critical phase of his plan. The countdown had begun. Chapter 4. Opening moves. You've got everything you need? Dominic asked his children as they stood in his sister Renee's driveway. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly trimmed lawn of the suburban sanctuary where his kids would stay during what he'd told them was his business trip. "Yes, Dad," Lily answered, her voice small but steady. Since her confession, a new understanding had formed between them, a secret language of glances and reassurances. Tommy bounced excitedly beside his sister, eager to spend time with his cousin Anthony and his aunt's legendary cookie-baking sessions. "Can we go fishing on Saturday, Aunt Renee?" Dad said maybe you'd take us. Renee Mercer Dalton ruffled her nephew's hair. At 42, 2 years older than Dominic, she had the same strong jaw and determined eyes. "Absolutely, buddy. The lake's full of bass this time of year." As the kids ran inside, Renee fixed her brother with a penetrating stare. "You don't look like a man heading to a business meeting, Dom. You look like someone going to war." Dominic had told Renee only that he and Miranda were having serious problems. His sister, who'd never fully warmed to Miranda, hadn't pressed for details, a mercy he appreciated. "I'll explain everything soon," he promised. "Just keep them happy and distracted for the next 4 days. No contact with Miranda. She already called this morning, asking if she could take them to some water park on Friday." Dominic's jaw tightened. "What did you say?" "That we already have plans." "Which we do. I'm taking them to Aunt Martha's lake house." Renee squeezed his arm. "Whatever this is, be careful. Those kids need you." As Dominic drove away, he made a call on his car's secured line. "Floyd, I'm headed to location 1 now. Is everything set?" "All arranged," the investigator confirmed. The motel manager was very cooperative once I mentioned certain tax irregularities we could overlook. Room 118 has been equipped as requested. Dominic's first destination wasn't Denver. It was the Pine Hollow Motel, the same establishment where Miranda and Richard had met numerous times according to the GPS data. Using a fake name and cash, Floyd had secured the room next to their usual rendezvous spot. Meanwhile, across town, Miranda was meeting her sister Vanessa for lunch, a lunch Dominic knew about because she'd mentioned it that morning. What Miranda didn't know was that Bryce had arranged for one of his security team members, a woman named Teresa, to be seated at the next table, recording everything. By mid-afternoon, Dominic had received confirmation that his absence from town was established. He'd arranged for a colleague to attend the Denver meetings in his place, sharing only that a family emergency had arisen. His phone now showed a Denver location thanks to GPS spoofing technology Bryce had provided. Miranda had texted, "Hope you landed safely. Kids are with Renee. Love you." The casual lie made his stomach turn. At precisely 4:30 p.m., Floyd texted, "Subjects making contact. Meeting arranged for 7 p.m. at the usual location." Dominic checked into room 117 at the Pine Hollow Motel at 6:15 p.m., wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, his rental car parked away from the security cameras. The room was sparse but functional. Floyd had already installed additional surveillance equipment that would record everything in the adjacent room once activated. At 6:57 p.m., through the paper-thin walls, Dominic heard the door to room 118 open. Richard's voice came first, confident, slightly louder than necessary as always. "I thought your flight was never going to arrive," Miranda's voice responded, followed by sounds that made Dominic's jaw clench. He activated the recording equipment, then stepped outside through the back window as planned. Phase 1 was underway. While Miranda and Richard conducted their affair mere feet away, Dominic drove to Richard's house. Vanessa would be at her book club until 9:30 p.m., information Teresa had confirmed during the lunch recording. Using the key he had made from an impression Floyd had obtained weeks earlier, Dominic entered the house where his wife's sister lived with her unfaithful husband. He moved silently through the rooms, placing small cameras in strategic locations: the master bedroom, Richard's home office, the living room. These weren't for collecting more affair evidence. That part was done. These were for monitoring the aftermath of what was to come. Dominic also left something in Richard's desk drawer, documents that appeared to be from Miranda's personal email account, discussing their plans to leave their spouses. These were expertly fabricated by one of Bryce's contacts, containing just enough truth from the actual surveillance to be believable. By 9:15 p.m., Dominic was back at the motel, collecting the surveillance equipment from room 117 as Miranda and Richard departed. He watched through a gap in the curtains as they shared one last kiss in the parking lot before driving away in separate vehicles. That night, he stayed at a small apartment Bryce had arranged for him under a false name. There, he reviewed the recordings, transferring copies to secure storage. Then he called Alexis. "Everything's proceeding as planned," he told her. "Are you sure you want to be involved in this?" Alexis's voice was calm, confident. "Absolutely. After what you've told me, they deserve everything that's coming to them." Dominic had met Alexis Novak at a business conference 3 months earlier. She was a marketing executive with a sharp mind and a direct manner that he found refreshing. Their initial conversations had been purely professional, but as his marriage investigation deepened, he'd found himself confiding in her during late-night calls. What had begun as professional respect had evolved into something more complicated. Alexis understood his need for justice in a way few others did, perhaps because of her own past experience with betrayal. She'd become not just a confidant, but a willing participant in the final phase of his plan. "I'll see you tomorrow then," he said. "Phase 2 begins at noon." As he ended the call, Dominic opened his laptop to check the new surveillance from the Denton house. Vanessa had returned from her book club and was reading in bed alone. Richard arrived 30 minutes later, kissing his wife's forehead as if he hadn't just been with her sister. The hypocrisy fueled Dominic's resolve. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. Chapter 5. The Counter-Move. Day 2 of Dominic's operation began with a series of calculated moves. First, a call to Miranda, maintaining the illusion that he was in Denver. "How's the weather there?" she asked, sounding genuinely interested. "Sunny. Warmer than expected," he replied, reading from the actual Denver forecast while sitting in the temporary apartment just 20 minutes from their home. "How are the kids doing at Renee's?" "I called yesterday, but she said they were out fishing. I might stop by today." "Let them enjoy their aunt," Dominic said smoothly. "You know how Renee plans every minute. Besides, weren't you organizing that charity auction stuff this week?" Miranda agreed reluctantly, and Dominic mentally thanked Renee for her fierce protectiveness. His children would remain safely away from the impending storm. At 11:30 a.m., Neil called to confirm that all legal preparations were complete. Dominic now had documentation securing his business assets and establishing his financial independence from the joint accounts he shared with Miranda. On paper, it appeared he'd been preparing for this separation for months, because in reality, that's exactly what Miranda had been doing behind his back, according to Floyd's intelligence. At precisely noon, Dominic met Alexis at a small cafe in neighboring Westfield, far enough from Oak Ridge Heights to avoid recognition, but close enough for the next phase. Alexis was striking in a simple blue dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional style. At 35, she had the confident poise of someone accustomed to commanding attention in boardrooms. "You look exhausted," she noted as he sat down. "Haven't slept much," he admitted, "but everything's in place." They reviewed the plan over lunch. Alexis asked pointed questions, suggesting refinements that Dominic had to admit improved the strategy. Her marketing background gave her a unique insight into how people would react to public revelations. "The family dinner is still set for Friday," she confirmed. Dominic nodded. "Miranda thinks it's to celebrate my mother's birthday. Everyone will be there. Her sister, Richard, my parents, Renee, and her husband, a few close friends. And you're sure you want to play out that way? It will be hard on the children. The kids will be with my parents by then. They'll leave before the main event." Dominic's voice hardened. "Miranda and Richard chose to conduct their affair with my children in the house. They involved Lily," threatened her. "This needs to be public, within our inner circle at least." After lunch, they drove separately to Richard's office building downtown. As planned, Alexis entered first, requesting a meeting with Richard under the pretense of discussing a marketing partnership with her firm. Dominic watched from his car as she disappeared inside. 40 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from Alexis. Meeting set for Thursday. He took the bait completely, even suggested drinks after. Phase 2 was progressing perfectly. Richard, always eager to expand his architectural firm's reputation, had unknowingly invited a key player in his downfall into his inner sanctum. While Alexis worked on Richard, Dominic had another target. He drove to the community center where Miranda volunteered Wednesday afternoons. Parking where he could see the entrance, but wouldn't be easily spotted, he waited until he saw her arrive in her silver SUV. Once she was inside, he approached her vehicle. Using the spare key, he quickly installed a small device under the dashboard, a modified GPS tracker that would not only record her movements, but could remotely access her car's computer system. It was one of Bryce's more questionable tools, technically in a legal gray area, but essential for the plan's final phase. As he finished and walked away, a voice called out, "Dominic? Is that you?" He turned to find Patricia Harmon, one of their closest couple friends, looking at him with surprise. "I thought you were in Denver this week." Dominic's mind raced, but his face remained composed. "Flew back early. Just dropping something off for Miranda. Don't mention it, though. It's a surprise." Patricia smiled, though something in her expression suggested skepticism. "Of course. We're still on for the dinner Friday." "Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it." He matched her smile with practiced ease. After Patricia walked away, Dominic called Bryce immediately. "We may have a complication. Patricia Harmon saw me outside the community center. You think she'll tell Miranda?" "Hard to say, but we should accelerate the timeline, just in case." That evening, Phase 2 continued as Floyd executed as part of the plan. The private investigator accidentally encountered Vanessa at the grocery store, introducing himself as someone new to town. Their conversation, seemingly casual, steered toward local families and eventually to Vanessa mentioning her sister and brother-in-law. "Mercer? The fitness center guy?" Floyd had asked, following the script. "I just heard something about him at my gym. Some business deal in Denver falling through. Poor guy apparently lost a fortune." The seed planted, Floyd reported back to Dominic that Vanessa had seemed genuinely concerned and had immediately made a phone call after their conversation, presumably to either Miranda or Richard. As midnight approached, Dominic checked the surveillance feeds from the Denton house. Sure enough, Richard was in his office, making agitated phone calls. One, according to the audio, was to his business partner about liquidating certain investments immediately. Another was to Miranda. "We may need to move up our timeline," Richard told her. "I'm hearing rumors about Dominic's financial situation that could complicate things." "What are you talking about?" Miranda sounded confused. "Dominic's in Denver closing a major deal, not losing money." "That's not what I'm hearing. Just be prepared to move quickly if necessary." After the call ended, Dominic smiled grimly at his laptop screen. Richard was already reacting to misinformation, making hasty decisions that would only compound his eventual downfall. Greed and self-preservation were powerful motivators, and Richard was proving predictably susceptible to both. Dominic sent a group text to Bryce, Neil, and Floyd. Acceleration confirmed. Execute Phase 3 tomorrow instead of Thursday. The response came quickly from all three. Understood. Tomorrow, while Miranda thought he was still in Denver, and while Richard scrambled to protect his financial interests based on false information, Dominic would set in motion the events that would culminate in Friday's revelation. As he finally lay down to sleep, his phone buzzed with a text from Alexis. "Just received word that our mutual friend is making inquiries about my company. He's checking my credentials. Good thing we prepared for this." Indeed, they had. Alexis's company was real, her credentials impeccable. Richard could investigate all he wanted. He would find only a legitimate business and a professional woman interested in a partnership. What he wouldn't find was her connection to Dominic, carefully obscured through layers of mutual acquaintances and business relationships that would take far more time to unravel than Richard had. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. Chapter 6. The Revelation Approaches. Day 3 dawned with unexpected developments. Dominic woke to urgent texts from both Bryce and Floyd. Floyd, subject or made early morning withdrawal of $50,000 cash from personal account. Currently en route to attorney's office, not previously on our radar. Bryce, subject M received call from P. Harmon at 7:15 a.m. Conversation suggested suspicion about your whereabouts. Surveillance shows M now checking flight statuses to Denver. Dominic swore under his breath. Patricia had said something after all, and Miranda was now checking his story. Meanwhile, Richard was moving money and consulting lawyers Dominic didn't know about. The carefully constructed timeline was collapsing. Initiate contingency protocol, he texted back to both men. Then he called Neil. We need to move everything up. Today, not tomorrow. Neil's voice was calm despite the early hour. The documentation is ready. I just need your final authorization to file. Do it. All of it. Dom, once I submit these papers, there's no turning back. I'm counting on that. By 9:30 a.m., Neil had electronically filed for divorce on Dominic's behalf, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting emergency temporary custody of the children based on documentation of Miranda's threats to send Lily to boarding school against her will. Simultaneously, he filed injunctions freezing several of the joint accounts Miranda had been quietly draining over the past months. At 10:15 a.m., Dominic received confirmation that Miranda had been officially served with papers at the community center, where she'd been meeting with the charity auction committee. Floyd, who had arranged for a process server to be present, reported that she had immediately left the meeting in visible distress. Moments later, his phone exploded with calls and texts from Miranda. He let them go to voicemail, listening as her messages evolved from confusion to anger to desperate pleading. Dominic, there must be some mistake. Call me back immediately. How dare you ambush me like this? In front of everyone. Please, we need to talk. Whatever you think you know, it's not what it seems. While Miranda's world began to crumble, Richard was making his own desperate moves. According to Bryce's surveillance, he had transferred substantial funds to an offshore account and was attempting to book flights to Cancun, exactly as they had predicted when planning the contingency protocols. At 12:45 p.m., Alexis called. Richard just canceled our meeting for tomorrow, claiming a family emergency. But he asked if we could reschedule for next week. Still thinks he has a future to plan for. Perfect, Dominic replied. Are you ready for this afternoon? Everything's arranged. Are you sure about this part of the plan? It's the riskiest. It's essential, he insisted. The financial and legal consequences aren't enough. They need to feel what I felt. Public humiliation, betrayal by someone trusted. By 2 p.m., Miranda had tracked Dominic down at his temporary apartment, likely by using the same phone tracking app they'd installed to keep tabs on the kids. He watched from his window as she pounded on the door, mascara streaking her face. I know you're in there, she shouted. We need to talk about these ridiculous accusations. He didn't answer. According to the contingency protocol, direct confrontation would happen only at the time and place of his choosing. Miranda eventually left, but not before taping a handwritten note to his door. Whatever you think you know is wrong. I love you. Call me. The calculated desperation in her words fueled his resolve. At 3:30 p.m., Dominic drove to Richard and Vanessa's house, timing his arrival for when he knew Vanessa would be home alone. Richard, according to Floyd's tracking, was meeting with his attorney. Vanessa appeared shocked when she opened the door to find her brother-in-law standing there. Dominic, aren't you supposed to be in Denver? May I come in? He asked quietly. There's something you need to know. Inside, he handed her a sealed envelope. I wish there was an easier way to do this, but you deserve the truth. The envelope contained selected photographs and transcripts from his surveillance, enough to prove the affair beyond any doubt, but carefully edited to spare Vanessa the most intimate details. He watched as confusion gave way to disbelief and then to devastating comprehension on her face. How long? She whispered, hands trembling. About 11 months, for what I've discovered. My sister, my own sister. Tears spilled onto the documents in her lap. Dominic felt a moment of genuine remorse for her pain. Vanessa was collateral damage in this war, an innocent caught in the crossfire. I'm truly sorry, Vanessa. You didn't deserve this. Does everyone know? Her voice had a hollow quality that he recognized from his own darkest moments. Not everyone, but after Friday they will. Her head snapped up. What happens Friday? He explained his plan for the family dinner. The public revelation, the recordings, everything except Alexis's role, which he kept himself. To his surprise, Vanessa's expression hardened. I want to be there. You will be. You are already invited. No, she said, wiping her tears with sudden determination. I want to be part of it. They betrayed both of us. Both of us should have a say in how they pay. This wasn't in the plan. Dominic hesitated, evaluating the potential impact of Vanessa's involvement. Finally, he nodded. Be at Bryce Wellington's office tonight at 8 p.m. We'll discuss how to adjust the plan. As he left Vanessa's house, Dominic received another text from Floyd. Subject has booked hotel room for tonight. Not returning home. Richard was running. Predictable, but it wouldn't help him. By 5 p.m., Dominic had confirmation that the legal maneuvers were proceeding as planned. The bank had frozen the accounts Neil had specified. Miranda's credit cards, supplemental cards on Dominic's primary accounts, had been canceled. Richard's business partner had been anonymously informed of concerning financial irregularities that required immediate investigation. The noose was tightening, but the most devastating blow was yet to come. At 6:30 p.m., Dominic met Alexis at a hotel across town. She arrived with several shopping bags and a determined expression. I had to improvise some of the wardrobe since we're accelerating, she explained as they entered the suite he'd reserved. But I think it will work even better this way. Inside, they reviewed the revised plan for Friday night. With Vanessa now potentially involved, certain adjustments were necessary. Alexis made notes, asking clarifying questions, suggesting refinements that showed why she excelled in crisis management. "You're sure you still want to go through with the most theatrical elements?" she asked. "The legal and financial consequences are already in motion. The rest is justice," Dominic finished. "They didn't just have an affair. They threatened my daughter. They planned to take my children, my home, my reputation. This can't just end with lawyers and bank accounts." Alexis nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Then we'll make sure it's flawless." As she left to make final preparations, Dominic received one last report for the day. Floyd had managed to place a tracker on Richard's new hotel room key card. Bryce confirmed that all technical elements for Friday were ready. Neil reported that Miranda had hired her own attorney, but too late to prevent the initial financial restrictions from taking effect. Everything was falling into place. Just one more day until the final act began. That night, Dominic finally called his children, speaking first with Tommy about his fishing adventure with Aunt Renee, then with Lily. "Dad!" His daughter's voice was small but steady. "Mom called today. She was crying. She said you two had a fight." Dominic closed his eyes, reminding himself why all this elaborate vengeance was necessary. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy and I are having some problems. But I promise you, everything is going to be okay. No one is sending you anywhere you don't want to go. Are you coming to Grandma's birthday dinner?" "Yes, I'll be there. And after that, you and I and Tommy are going to have a long talk about some changes. But no matter what, I love you both more than anything." After hanging up, Dominic stared out the window at the darkening sky. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed lives of Miranda and Richard would come crashing down around them. And from the wreckage, he would build something new for himself, for his children, and perhaps for Alexis too. The revelation was approaching, and it would be devastating. Chapter 7. The Dinner Party. Friday evening arrived with the perfection of a stage production. The venue, an elegant private dining room at La Maison, the most exclusive restaurant in Oak Ridge Heights, had been Dominic's mother's choice, but served his purposes perfectly. Intimate enough for family drama, public enough to prevent extreme reactions. By 6:30 p.m., guests began arriving. Dominic's parents, Eleanor and Howard Mercer, were first. His mother resplendent in a new dress for her birthday celebration, blissfully unaware of the real purpose of the gathering. His father, a retired judge with the same penetrating gaze Dominic had inherited, seemed to sense something was amiss, but said nothing. Next came Renee and her husband Calvin, with Dominic's children in tow. Lily ran to him immediately, wrapping her arms around his waist. Tommy followed, chattering about the fish he'd caught at the lake house. "They had an amazing time," Renee whispered as she hugged her brother. "Are you sure about tonight?" Dominic nodded imperceptibly. "The kids will leave with Mom and Dad before dessert. That's when it happens." Renee squeezed his arm. I'm right behind you. Literally, I'll be sitting right behind you in case you need backup. The Harmons arrived next, Patricia looking uncomfortable as she caught Dominic's eye, Frank oblivious as he headed straight for the bar. Two other couples from their social circle followed, all part of the inner circle that had unknowingly witnessed the disintegration of his marriage. At 6:55 p.m., Vanessa arrived alone, her face a composed mask that only those who knew her well would recognize as brittle with strain. Following their meeting at Bryce's office the previous night, she had embraced her role in tonight's revelation with an intensity that surprised even Dominic. Is everything ready? She asked quietly as she air-kissed his cheek in greeting. All set, he confirmed. You remember your cue? She nodded, her eyes hard as she surveyed the room. I almost hope he doesn't show. It would be another nail in his coffin. But Richard did show, arriving at precisely 7 p.m., looking harried but outwardly confident. He shook hands around the room, kissed Vanessa with practiced affection, and clapped Dominic on the back as if nothing had changed. Good to see you back from Denver, he said. Heard there were some complications with the deal? Nothing I couldn't handle, Dominic replied smoothly. Where's Miranda? Running late, Richard said, a flicker of something, concern? Fear, crossing his face. Women, right? Never on time. At 7:10 p.m., when Miranda still hadn't arrived, Dominic received a text from Floyd. Subject M appears to be packing luggage at your home. 3 suitcases so far. Destination unknown. So she was planning to run. It wouldn't matter. The legal wheels were already in motion, and tonight's event would proceed with or without her. To Dominic's mild surprise, Miranda did arrive at 7:18 p.m., looking immaculate but strained. She kissed his mother, hugged the children, and approached Dominic with a brittle smile. We need to talk, she hissed through clenched teeth. Privately. After dinner, he replied calmly. It's Mother's birthday. Let's not make a scene. The meal progressed with excruciating normalcy. Eleanor Mercer beamed as servers brought course after course of her favorite dishes. The children were well behaved, though Lily watched her parents with worried eyes. Conversation flowed around safe topics, community events, Tommy's soccer team, Eleanor's volunteer work at the hospital. Throughout the meal, Miranda attempted to maintain her composure, though Dominic noted the slight tremble in her hand as she lifted her wine glass, the too bright quality of her laugh. Across the table, Richard seemed equally tense, checking his phone frequently beneath the tablecloth. At 8:30 p.m., as planned, Dominic's father announced that he and Eleanor would be taking the children for ice cream and then back to their house for the night. Grandpa says I can stay up until 10, Tommy announced excitedly as he hugged his parents goodbye. Lily lingered, her arms around Dominic's neck. Is everything okay, Dad? She whispered. It will be, he promised, kissing her forehead. I love you, Lil. Everything I do is to protect you and Tommy. After the children and his parents departed, Dominic nodded subtly to the server, actually one of Bryce's security team in disguise. The man immediately dimmed the lights slightly and brought out a bottle of champagne. Before dessert, Dominic said, rising to his feet and lifting his glass, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Family is everything to me. Loyalty, trust, these are values I try to live by. Around the table, faces watched him with varying degrees of confusion, suspicion, and, in Miranda and Richard's cases, growing alarm. Recent events have forced me to reevaluate who in my life embodies these values, he continued, and who does not. Miranda stood abruptly. Dominic, that's enough. We agreed to discuss this privately. Did we? He asked, his voice deadly calm. Just like you and Richard agreed that threatening my daughter was an acceptable way to keep your affair secret? A collective gasp rippled around the table. Richard half rose from his seat. This is inappropriate, Dominic. There are other guests. Oh, I'm counting on that, Dominic cut in. Our friends deserve to know exactly who they've been socializing with. He nodded again, and the disguised server wheeled in a small cart with a laptop and projector. Before anyone could react, the blank wall behind the table illuminated with video footage. Miranda and Richard entering the Pine Hollow Motel, timestamp clearly visible. What is this? Vanessa demanded, playing her role perfectly despite having seen the footage the night before. Evidence, Dominic said simply, of an 11-month affair conducted by my wife and your husband. In our bed, while our children were in the house. In motels. In his office. Anywhere they could betray us. The footage changed to audio waveforms as Miranda's voice filled the room. He suspects nothing. I'll tell him it's a spa weekend. Once the divorce is final, we'll have everything. The house, half his business. Miranda lunged for the laptop, but Bryce, who had been waiting by the door, stepped forward to block her path. You had me followed? Recorded? She hissed, face contorted with rage and humiliation. That's illegal. Actually, Neil spoke up from his seat. Surveillance conducted by a homeowner in their own residence is perfectly legal in this state. As Mr. Mercer's attorney, I can assure you the evidence is admissible. Richard had gone pale. Vanessa, I can't explain. Save it, she spat, tears streaming down her face despite having rehearsed this moment. My sister, Richard? My own sister? The room erupted into chaos as other guests reacted with shock, disgust, and in Patricia Harmon's case, a strange look of vindication. Miranda turned to Dominic, her composure completely shattered. You've ruined everything, she sobbed. Why couldn't you just accept the divorce like a normal person? Why this spectacle? Because you threatened our daughter, Dominic replied, his voice carrying over the commotion. Because you planned to take my children, my home, my reputation. Because you thought I was too blind, too trusting to fight back. Richard had recovered enough to attempt damage control. Everyone calm down. This is a private matter that's being blown completely out of proportion. Private? Dominic laughed coldly. Like the private offshore account you set up yesterday? Or the hotel reservation you made to flee the country? Your business partner might be interested in how you've been diverting client funds. The IRS certainly is. Richard's face drained of what little color remained. You can't prove any of that. I already have. Dominic turned to the room at large. I apologize for involving all of you in this unpleasantness. But I believed you deserved to know the truth about the people you've welcomed into your homes, trusted with your friendship. As the guests began to collect their belongings, murmuring in shocked disbelief, Dominic nodded to Bryce again. The side door opened, and Alexis entered. She was stunning in a simple black dress, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. She moved with confident grace to Dominic's side, taking his hand in plain view of everyone. Dominic, Miranda gasped. Who is this? Kids, Dominic announced to the remaining guests. Meet your new stepmom. The calculated phrase, so similar to what Miranda and Richard had planned to tell his children once their divorce was finalized, hit his wife like a physical blow. She staggered back, clutching the edge of the table for support. This is Alexis, Dominic continued calmly. Unlike some people in this room, she understands the meaning of loyalty. The revelation of Alexis was the final devastating stroke in his plan. Not only had he exposed the affair and set in motion the destruction of Miranda and Richard's reputations and financial security, but he had also shown them that he had moved on, found happiness while they were still reeling from the consequences of their actions. Alexis smiled warmly at the shocked faces around them. I've heard so much about all of you. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. As the remaining guests filed out, leaving only the key players in this drama, Miranda made one last desperate attempt. The children, she said, her voice breaking. You can't keep them from me. I'm their mother. The courts will decide that, Dominic replied. But since you were willing to send Lily to boarding school as punishment for telling the truth, I'm not optimistic about your chances. Richard, seeing his life collapsing around him, turned to Vanessa with pleading eyes. We can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start. The locks have been changed, she replied coldly. Your clothes are in trash bags on the front lawn. The divorce papers are on top. As Miranda and Richard absorbed the totality of their defeat, Dominic felt not triumph, but a cold satisfaction. Justice had been served. The elaborate plan he had set in motion had worked perfectly. The people who had betrayed him, threatened his daughter, planned to take everything from him, were now facing the consequences of their actions. Taking Alexis's hand, he walked toward the exit, leaving Miranda and Richard to contemplate the ruins of the lives they had gambled and lost. The revelation was complete. Now came the aftermath. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The 3 weeks following the La Maison revelation unfolded like aftershocks from an earthquake, each day bringing new developments, new confrontations, new adjustments to a landscape permanently altered. Dominic moved back into the family home with the children. Miranda, blocked from accessing their joint accounts and with her credit cards canceled, had taken refuge in a small apartment her parents owned across town. The temporary custody arrangement, expedited through Neil's connections, gave Dominic primary custody with Miranda allowed supervised visitation twice weekly. The first of these visits had been tense, with Lily refusing to speak to her mother and Tommy confused by the strained atmosphere. "Why is Mommy staying at Grandma and Grandpa Peterson's apartment?" he'd asked afterward, his 7-year-old face crumpled with worry. Dominic had knelt to his son's level, choosing his words carefully. "Mommy and I need some time apart to figure out grown-up problems. But we both love you and Lily very much. Is it because of Uncle Rick?" Lily said he was in your bed with Mommy. The innocent question had sent a fresh wave of anger through Dominic, but he'd maintained his composure. "Yes, buddy. What Uncle Rick and Mommy did was wrong, and now there are consequences." Lily had adapted more quickly than expected, showing a resilience that both impressed and saddened Dominic. "I knew something bad was happening," she confided one night as he tucked her in. "Mommy was always whispering on the phone and getting mad when I came into the room. You did the right thing telling me," he assured her. "Being honest is always braver than keeping secrets." Richard's downfall had been even more spectacular than Miranda's. The anonymous tip to his business partner had triggered an internal audit, revealing years of financial improprieties. His architectural firm had placed him on indefinite leave pending investigation. Vanessa, true to her word, had filed for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences and naming Miranda as correspondent, ensuring the affair would become public record. The social fallout had been immediate and harsh. Invitations to community events dried up. Former friends crossed streets to avoid encounters. The scandal had spread through Oak Ridge Heights with the efficiency of a well-oiled gossip machine, each retelling more dramatic than the last. Through it all, Dominic had maintained a dignified silence in public, focusing on his children and his business. The story he allowed to circulate, that he had discovered his wife's infidelity, filed for divorce, and happened to meet someone new during the separation, was technically true if deliberately misleading about the timeline. Alexis had played her role perfectly, appearing occasionally at his side at business functions, charming his friends, and maintaining a respectful distance from his children. Their relationship, initially just a tactical element in his revenge plan, had evolved into something more complicated. The attraction that had begun as mutual respect had deepened during their collaboration, though neither had yet defined what might come next. On the Wednesday of the third week, Dominic met Neil at his downtown office to review the latest developments in the divorce proceedings. "Miranda's attorney is getting desperate," Neil reported, spreading documents across his desk. "They're now claiming emotional distress and invasion of privacy regarding the surveillance." "Will it stick?" Dominic asked, reviewing the motion. Neil shook his head. "Doubtful. The judge assigned to your case is notably unsympathetic to infidelity, and the documentation of her threats regarding Lily strengthens our position considerably. And the financial situation? The temporary freeze on the accounts worked exactly as planned. She's been unable to access the funds she was planning to use for her escape with Richard. Her attorney is now requesting emergency spousal support." Dominic considered this. His plan had never been to leave Miranda destitute, only to prevent her from executing her plan to take half his business, the house, and the children. "We can offer something reasonable, but contingent on her dropping the invasion of privacy claims." "Good strategy," Neil nodded. "Shows the court you're being fair despite the circumstances." As Dominic left the meeting, his phone buzzed with a text from Renee. "Emmett House. Showed up unannounced. Says she needs to talk to you. Nanny called me." He drove home immediately, tension knotting his shoulders. The custody arrangement specifically prohibited unscheduled visits. This was either desperation or a tactical move to claim he was alienating the children. When he arrived, he found Miranda sitting in the living room, Lily and Tommy nowhere in sight. "The nanny took them to the park," she said, noting his searching gaze. "I asked for a few minutes alone with you." Miranda looked different, deflated somehow, the polished perfection of her appearance diminished by stress and sleepless nights. She wore no makeup, and her normally immaculate hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. "You're violating the custody agreement," he said coldly, remaining standing. "I could call the police." "Please don't." Her voice cracked. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Against his better judgment, Dominic sat in the chair opposite her. 5 minutes. "I want to apologize," she began, the words tumbling out as if she'd rehearsed them. "Not just for the affair, but for threatening Lily. It was unforgivable. I was desperate and scared and made a terrible mistake." "Which mistake?" Dominic asked, his voice neutral. "The 11-month affair? Threatening our daughter? Or planning to take half my business in the divorce you were secretly arranging?" Miranda flinched. "All of it. I don't expect forgiveness, Dominic. But I am their mother, and this arrangement, seeing them for 2 hours twice a week with your sister watching my every move, it's killing me. You should have considered the consequences before involving our children in your deception." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Richard and we got caught up in something that spiraled out of control. What began as a stupid flirtation became a fantasy of a different life. But I never stopped loving the kids. Never. And me?" Dominic found himself asking, surprised by the question even as it left his lips. "Did you ever love me, Miranda? Or was I just the successful husband you settled for?" Pain flickered across her face. "I did love you. In the beginning, completely. But over the years, you became so focused on the business, on building your empire. There were weeks when we barely spoke about anything other than the kids' schedules or household logistics. So you found comfort with my wife's sister's husband. In our bed." She winced. "It was unforgivable. I know that. I'm not here asking for reconciliation. I'm asking for a chance to be a mother to my children without supervised visits like I'm some kind of criminal." Dominic studied her, trying to separate genuine remorse from strategic maneuvering. "Where's Richard in all this? Still planning your future together now that both your marriages are over?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Richard is in Mexico. Left last week when the firm suspended him. Emptied what was left in his personal accounts and ran. Hasn't answered my calls since." This was new information. Floyd had reported Richard's departure, but not that he'd abandoned Miranda as well. Another predictable betrayal. "I'll consider modifying the visitation arrangement," Dominic said finally. "But first, you withdraw all challenges to the divorce terms I've offered. Full custody remains with me, though we can discuss more generous visitation. You get the vacation property and the settlement we proposed, but my businesses remain untouched." Miranda nodded slowly, defeat evident in every line of her body. "And Alexis? Are you really together?" The question caught him off guard. "That's no longer your concern. The kids mention her. Said she came for dinner last weekend." Dominic felt a flicker of annoyance. He'd been careful to introduce Alexis to the children gradually, as a friend rather than a romantic interest. "My personal life is separate from our co-parenting arrangement." As Miranda rose to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I truly am sorry, Dominic. Not just for getting caught, but for the pain I caused. Someday, I hope you'll believe that." After she left, Dominic sat alone in the silent house, turning their conversation over in his mind. The meticulous revenge he had orchestrated had worked exactly as planned. Miranda and Richard had lost everything they valued: reputation, financial security, family stability. Justice had been served cold and precise. Yet the victory fell hollow in certain moments, especially when he saw the confusion in Tommy's eyes or the premature seriousness in Lily's. The children were resilient, but they had been wounded by truths they should never have had to confront. His phone chimed with a text from Alexis. Meeting finished early. "Free for dinner tonight?" As he typed his reply, Dominic contemplated the strange path that had brought her into his life. What had begun as a strategic alliance was evolving into something genuine. A connection forged in unusual circumstances, but growing stronger with each passing day. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, he sat with Alexis on the back deck, sharing a bottle of wine beneath the stars. Miranda came to the house today, he told her. Wants to modify the custody arrangement. Alexis considered this, her expression thoughtful. Are you going to agree? Probably with conditions. The kids need their mother, despite everything. And you? What do you need, Dominic? The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had yet articulated. In the 3 weeks since the revelation at La Maison, their public relationship had gradually become less performance and more reality. Dinners that began as strategy sessions evolved into genuine conversations. Touches that started as calculated displays of affection lingered with authentic warmth. I need to know if this, he gestured between them, is still part of the plan, or if it's become something else. Alexis set down her wine glass, meeting his gaze directly. It was never just part of the plan for me. The attraction was real from the beginning, but I understood the boundaries. And now I think we've earned a right to find out what this could be without Miranda and Richard shadowing every interaction. Dominic reached for her hand, feeling something tight in his chest loosen for the first time in months. The elaborate revenge that had consumed him was complete. The justice he had sought had been delivered. Now came the harder part, rebuilding, healing, moving forward. As Alexis leaned against him, her head resting comfortably on his shoulder, Dominic realized that while the revelation had been necessary, the aftermath might hold something even more valuable, the possibility of genuine happiness after betrayal. The reckoning was complete. The renewal had just begun. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. 6 months after the fateful dinner at La Maison, Dominic stood in the backyard of his home. Their home now, watching as Lily showed Alexis how to perfect her cartwheel technique. Tommy raced around them with a model airplane, making elaborate zooming noises as he attacked them from above. The autumn air carried the scent of the apple cider simmering in the kitchen and the promise of the first frost. Leaves in brilliant shades of red and gold drifted from the maple trees, creating a natural confetti across the lawn they'd recently remodeled together. "Dad, watch this," Lily called, executing a wobbly roundoff that ended with her sprawled dramatically on the grass, giggling. "Perfect form," he praised, clapping as she took an exaggerated bow. Alexis helped her up, whispering something that made his daughter laugh even harder. The easy rapport between them had developed gradually over the past months, with Alexis careful never to overstep or try too hard to replace Miranda. Instead, she'd built her own relationship with the children, based on genuine interest and respect for their feelings. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, with Miranda ultimately accepting the terms Dominic had offered. She now lived in a condo across town and had the children every other weekend and 1 dinner night per week. The early tension of the custody exchanges had slowly eased into a cautious civility. Richard had eventually returned from Mexico, facing both the collapse of his marriage to Vanessa and serious professional consequences for the financial improprieties discovered at his firm. The criminal charges were still pending, though rumor had it he was negotiating a plea deal. Vanessa, after an initial period of bitter recrimination, had found unexpected strength in starting over. She'd enrolled in courses to finish the degree she'd abandoned when she married Richard and recently begun dating a professor from her literature class. The doorbell rang, interrupting Dominic's reflections. "I'll get it," he called, heading inside. He opened the front door to find Miranda standing on the porch, her arms full of school projects and art supplies. "Lily forgot her science poster board," she explained. "I thought she might need it for Monday." "Thanks," Dominic said, taking the unwieldy package. "They're out back if you want to say hello." 6 months ago, such an invitation would have been unthinkable. But time and the committed efforts of their family therapist, Dr. Bennett, who'd been working with all of them since the separation, had created space for a new kind of relationship. Not friendship, exactly, but a functional partnership centered entirely on their children's well-being. Miranda hesitated. "Is Alexis here?" "Yes," Dominic replied honestly. She's helping Lily with gymnastics moves. Another pause. Maybe just a quick hello, then. He led her through the house. The home they'd once shared, now subtly transformed with Alexis's influence. New artwork on the walls, different furniture arrangements, the sunroom converted into a reading nook filled with books and comfortable cushions. In the backyard, Lily spotted her mother first. "Mom, watch what I can do." She launched into her cartwheel routine again, this time landing with slightly more control. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Miranda called, staying on the deck as Tommy came racing over for a quick hug before returning to his aerial missions. Alexis straightened, approaching the deck with casual confidence. Over the months, the two women had developed their own delicate balance. Neither friends nor enemies, but participants in a complex family ecosystem centered around the children they both cared for. "Miranda," Alexis nodded. "The kids have been having a great afternoon. Lily's really improving her gymnastics." "She mentioned you used to compete," Miranda acknowledged. "Thanks for working with her." The exchange was brief but civil, lacking the brittle tension of their early encounters. As Miranda said goodbye to the children with promises to pick them up Friday after school, Dominic walked her back to the front door. "They seem happy," she observed quietly. "They are," Dominic confirmed. "But they miss you when they're here, just like they miss us when they're with you." Miranda nodded, unexpected tears brightening her eyes. "I never thought we'd end up here, but I'm grateful we found a way to make it work for them." As she turned to leave, she added, "Richard called yesterday. Wanted to catch up. I told him I was moving forward, not backward." Dominic felt a flicker of surprise, then approval. "Good for you." After she drove away, he returned to the backyard where Alexis was now helping Tommy adjust the wings on his airplane for maximum velocity. She looked up as Dominic approached, a question in her eyes. "All good," he assured her. "Just co-parenting logistics." Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Dominic and Alexis sat at the kitchen island reviewing plans for the merger of their professional lives. Alexis's marketing firm had taken on Dominic's fitness centers as a client initially, but their success working together had led to discussions of a more permanent arrangement. "The expansion to the Chicago market is perfect timing," Alexis observed, studying the projections on her laptop. "With my team handling the rebranding and your operational expertise, we could double the footprint within 18 months." Dominic watched her as she spoke, struck by how completely she'd integrated into his life, professionally, personally, even parentally. The strategic alliance he'd formed with her during his darkest days had evolved into the most honest relationship he'd ever experienced. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "It's not what you might think, so don't panic." Alexis raised an eyebrow, curious as he placed a small velvet box on the counter between them. "We've never really talked about what happened 6 months ago," he began. "About how we started. About whether the end justified the means. Are we having a moral philosophy discussion at 11 o'clock on a Saturday?" she teased gently. "Maybe," he admitted. "But mostly I want you to know that while our beginning was unconventional, what grew from it is the most real thing in my life." Alexis reached for his hand. "I've never regretted helping you, Dominic. What Miranda and Richard did, threatening Lily, planning to take everything from you, they made their choices and faced the consequences. We all did," he acknowledged. "But I'm grateful every day that you chose to stay after the plan was complete, that you helped me rebuild rather than just executing the demolition." She smiled. "Dramatic metaphors aside, I stayed because I fell in love with you, with Lily and Tommy, with the family we've been creating." Dominic pushed the box toward her. "This isn't an engagement ring. I think we both agree that's still a conversation for the future, but it is a promise." Alexis opened the box to reveal a delicate silver key attached to a simple chain. "A key to the lake house," he explained. "I closed on it yesterday. It's ours, yours, mine, the kids. A place for new memories, not haunted by the past." The lake house had been a dream they discussed during quiet evenings, a retreat where they could take the children fishing, teach them to sail, create family traditions untainted by the shadows of betrayal and revenge. Alexis lifted the key, emotion evident in her eyes. "It's perfect, Dominic. A new beginning." As she slipped the chain around her neck, Dominic reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain of discovery, the cold calculation of his revenge, the public humiliation of those who had betrayed him, all had served their purpose. Justice had been delivered. But this quiet moment of connection, this promise of a future built on honesty rather than deception, this was the true victory. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Dominic woke early, as was his habit, and found Alexis already in the kitchen preparing breakfast with Lily. Tommy sat at the counter, carefully coloring a birthday card for his cousin Anthony. "Dad, we're making French toast with cinnamon apples," Lily announced. "Alexis says it's brain food for my math test on Monday." "Is that so?" Dominic asked, catching Alexis's eye with a smile. "Then I definitely need some. Big meetings this week." As they moved around each other with practiced ease, passing syrup, refilling juice glasses, debating the optimal French toast cooking time, Dominic felt a profound contentment settle over him. The family he had fought so ruthlessly to protect had transformed, evolving into something different, but no less precious. The cold satisfaction of revenge had given way to the warmer pleasure of renewal. The meticulously executed plan that had once consumed his every waking moment was now just a chapter in a longer story, one with many pages yet to be written. After breakfast, as they prepared for a day at the new lake house, Dominic received a text from Renee. "Just heard Richard took the plea deal. 2 years, mostly probation. Thought you should know." He showed the message to Alexis as the kids ran upstairs to pack swimsuits and fishing gear. "Does it bother you," she asked quietly, "that he essentially got away with it?" Dominic considered the question, surprised to discover he felt nothing beyond mild interest at the information. 6 months ago, I would have been furious. Now it seems irrelevant. "Because you've moved on?" "Because I found something better to focus on," he corrected, drawing her into his arms. The best revenge wasn't the public humiliation or the financial consequences. It was this, building happiness from the ruins they left behind. Alexis leaned into his embrace. "Pretty philosophical for a Sunday morning, Mr. Mercer." "I have my moments," he grinned, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had during the darkest days of his carefully orchestrated vengeance. Upstairs, they could hear Lily and Tommy arguing good-naturedly about who would catch the biggest fish. Outside, the autumn sun bathed the yard in golden light, transforming ordinary trees and flowers into things of exceptional beauty. Dominic Mercer, once consumed by betrayal, once coldly devoted to the execution of perfect justice, looked around at the life he had recreated from the ashes of deception and felt not triumph or vindication, but genuine peace. The elaborate revenge had served its purpose. The revelation had exposed the truth. The reckoning had delivered consequences. But this moment, this ordinary Sunday morning filled with French toast and fishing plans and the woman who had walked with him through darkness into light, this was the true victory. Not the destruction of what was lost, but the creation of something new, something better.